If we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, August 7th, and the CNN headline this morning is that Trump reignites threat to take over D.C. after former Doge worker assaulted and attempted carjacking. This is then according to Salem News. You know that Donald Trump is president when a character with such an interesting name that we won't mention on this program makes national news for months and is the hero of the story. The New York Post said this: Edward Korstein, whose LinkedIn handle earned him a colorful nickname at Doge, was with a woman near downtown D.C. when he saw a group of juveniles approach their car and make a comment about taking the vehicle, according to a Metropolitan Police Department incident report obtained by the Post. At that point, for her safety, Korstein pushed his significant other into the vehicle and turned to deal with the suspects. The dramatic report continues, and so he ended up being assaulted and brutally beaten, and now President Trump is using the incident to call for federalization of the District of Columbia. The Washington Post reports that Trump wrote, "If D.C. doesn't get its act together and quickly, we will have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run and put more criminals on notice that they are not going to get away with it anymore." So let's welcome in Orrin McIntyre, who is a host at The Blaze. And Orrin, I've seen a lot of response on social media saying, hey, if D.C. can't get their crime under control, then President Trump should do it. What say you?
No, absolutely. The fact that our nation's capital is not one of the safest places in the world is an absolute shame for the United States. It's a deep source of shame. I've only been to D.C. a few times, but every time I've been there, even in the nicer parts of town, you have vagrants screaming at you, threats, all kinds of things across the city. It's ridiculous. And the fact that D.C. hasn't been able to get itself together is obviously a policy choice. We know that Democrats are incredibly soft on crime, and let's be clear, that's what Donald Trump was elected to do. This is one of the things that people ultimately want from the Trump administration is an increase in law and order. It's very clear Democrats are never going to fix their crime problem, and so it makes perfect sense for them to lose sovereignty over D.C. There's simply no reason home rule should continue to exist if these people can't manage it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true that if the state can't get their crime under control, then for the good of the order and for law and order, then things need to change. And especially in D.C. when the district and the purpose of the district not being a state anyway, in the original contemplation for the seat of federal government has now just been so expanded that, I really think that we need to go back to the original jurisdictional boundaries and instead of making D.C. a state, have kind of that, northern part and go to Maryland and the southern part go back to Virginia. And then you actually have under state control, and you don't have a lot of leftists that are really pushing their policy on the seat of government. So that's been another contemplation as well. What would this actually look like, though, if Trump, quote unquote, federalized D.C. in terms of taking over jurisdiction?
Well, obviously, you're going to have a lot of pushback. It's a lot of, for a very long time, people had wanted D.C. to, as you say, basically, function as a state. But that was the entire purpose of the city, was to be a neutral place that was not owned by any particular state and did not itself function as a real, true, municipal force that's not supposed to be swinging elections or anything. So a lot of the Democrats are going to, have this giant outcry because they're used to being under control, having control of this, having an electoral lockdown over this. But that's never what was intended in the first place. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable to call ultimately for the, Congress to retake control as it's supposed to.
Yeah, and this is in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution that gives Congress the authority to create a federal district to serve as the seat of government. And so the actual language here is, quote, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such a district not exceeding 10 miles square. So this was designed to ensure that the federal government would not be dependent on or influenced by any single state. And so even beyond the crime, which you mentioned, Oren, I mean, I'm so glad I'm not in D.C. anymore. And even when I lived there, which is crazy to say, it was almost half a decade ago now. But even then, there were concerns. And I mean, I remember when I had just moved out of DC to Florida, one of my friends who lived in my same former building said that one of the banks right across the street, and this was a nice part of Arlington, right across the street had just been robbed at gunpoint. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous that this kind of stuff happens in DC, Chicago, LA. I mean, New York, all of these Democrat-run cities have a problem with crime. And I think that this is intentional, that as you mentioned, their policies from the left are not to actually serve the people, to provide justice and to ensure that law and order. And so what can be done overall, not just with the District of Columbia, but I mean, this shouldn't be happening in any U.S. city.
Right. It's particularly embarrassing due to the status of D.C. as the capital of the greatest country in the world. The fact that we can't secure the safety of our citizens in a place like this is itself an indictment of our entire system. But as you point out, it's not just D.C. It's often Democrat-run cities, but also parallel along with Democrat cities, if we have to be honest, one of the biggest problems is the propensity to not police certain groups. One of the groups that's most likely to commit violent crime, unfortunately, statistically, is African Americans. And in Democrat cities, it's all about criminal justice reform. We reduce the amount of police making arrests. We create bail systems that no longer work. We go out of our way to cut short sentences and sweetheart deals for people. We charge any police officer who's equally applying the law of racism. And so less and less black communities are policed. And, of course, this is dangerous for everyone. It's also very dangerous for black communities because, as we've seen from the work of guys like Steve Saylor, the less black communities are policed, the more dangerous it becomes for black people as well as everyone else. And so the truth is that while we look at Democrat-run cities, and that is itself its own problem because of the policies they're applying, often it's the fact that they are directly telling their police officers not to police different communities that is creating an acceptance culture when it comes to crime in those areas.
Yeah, and this entire, as you describe it, acceptance culture and the results that outflow from that are really negative and damaging to the entire population. And the whole idea of criminal justice reform and the kind of the two main schools of thought when the soft on crime policies started taking shape and weren't really punitive. It was more about rehabilitative justice, restorative justice, and giving people a second chance. All of those things that sound really good in theory, but when criminals who are disposed to commit crimes end up not getting punished for their crime, then they know that they won't, then you no longer have a deterrence element. And so these cities are practically inviting people to commit all types of crimes, some of them very violent crime, like what happened in Washington, D.C. To this young man who was just simply trying to protect a young woman. And these types of things really need to be revisited. And this also goes to how not only law enforcement is told to stand down, but also the way that crimes are prosecuted. Because if you have these kinds of soft on crime policies, which a lot of Democrat elected, whether they're district attorneys or U.S. attorneys, shape their policies surrounding prosecutions, then you ultimately don't actually get to justice. You end up in chaos. And I think a lot of people, Oren, don't really pay attention to a lot of these local elections for things like prosecutors, in some instances where the police chiefs are elected. And really, we should be paying just as much attention to those elections as any other.
Well, let me tell you a terrifying story here too, Jenna, because one of the elections you need to be paying attention to is school board elections. You just mentioned restorative justice and its role in the prison system and the way it's created a permissive culture that allows people to be repeat offenders. It focuses more on the theoretical I can't say that today.
Rehabilitation, sure. Too early.
It focuses more on that than it does on the victim. And what that's now done is that trickles down even into places like Florida. I taught Florida public high schools, and we were using the restorative justice system, the failed prison justice system, to do student discipline in Florida public schools. In the land of Ron DeSantis, that's still the standard in most Florida public high schools. So not only is this poisonous ideology existing in major Democratic towns, major cities, not only is it increasing violent crime in those areas, it's making its way even into the public schools in our red states. That's how deeply this ideology permeates all of these institutions in American government.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that if we don't understand these insidious ideologies and just let them pervade, even as you're describing, and that's shocking to me on one hand, but on the other hand, it isn't, because if we don't get a hold of this and understand where this is coming from and root it out, then it's just become the common and accepted standard and practice for not only criminal justice theory, but also, as you mentioned, with school discipline. And, this kind of, soft parenting approach to whether it's discipline in schools or it's criminal justice in the legal system, we're seeing that the outcomes don't actually work. And so there needs to be a different model overall. And this is why, red states need to take the lead on that, but also blue states, those voters should be standing up and saying, we don't want these types of policies. We don't want things, like sanctuary cities, for example. I mean, that the entire notion that you can have a sanctuary city is completely antithetical with the concept of the rule of law. Yet here we are, and somehow we don't have a lot of challenges to sanctuary city states. We don't have a lot of challenges to some of these things in our school systems. And so is it just a matter, Oren, of not being aware as much of some of these things going on, or that we're just not really being that effective? Because I see the left pushing through so many different things all at once, and it's like the right can only focus on one thing at a time.
Well, we see, the fact that obviously a lot of conservatives, I think, are ultimately intimidated to use power. They're scared of taking an assertive role and making sure that they are culturally and legally dominant in these areas. And so, for instance, when it comes to sanctuary cities, this is just the doctrine of nullification, right? Like this is John C. Calhoun, and for some reason the Democrats have been getting away for a very long time and have paid zero price for doing so. But Republican governments have simply not been willing to leverage their power to put an end to this, as where Democrats will immediately deploy the federal government and threaten funding and cut off anything or everything they want in order to force municipalities to behave exactly the way they want. Unfortunately, we know what works. It's not like we don't know what works in a criminal justice system. Rudy Giuliani, however you feel about him, knew what to do with New York City, and the same thing is true in general. We know that increasing, the ability of police to interact with different populations, being able to be proactive, broken windows policing, not letting things slide out of order, having tough sentences, not being soft on crime. Incarceration of criminals is not a bad thing. That's what it's for. These are all policies that work. We know that they deter. We know that they stop crime. It's not that the left doesn't know what works. It's that they simply don't want to do it. They genuinely are never going to stand up and stop these people.
Yeah, they want the chaos, absolutely. And so, we need more people like Rudy Giuliani and fewer people like Mandami, who is attempting to be elected there in New York City. But it's up to the voters, and it's up to the people to just say, we won't stand for this chaos anymore. We need to get back to law and order and what the Constitution and the government of the United States promises. So Orrin McIntyre, really appreciate it. You can follow him on X at Orrin McIntyre, and also listen to him at The Blaze. We'll be right back with more.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we're going to the Holy Land on a tour in March of 2026. We can't wait to go back. My wife Allison and I have been leading these tours for over 2 decades, nearly 3 decades. And we're going in March of 2026 to Israel. See all the places that you've read about since you were a child in the Bible. Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, all of it. We'll be going there. And also my sons Walker and Wesley Wildman will be going to Greece on a Footsteps of Paul tour. You can do either the Holy Land trip or the Footsteps of Paul Greece tour, or both. For all the information on these tours, go to wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com, to get all the information on the 2026 March Israel and Greece tours.
Hey, I'm Brant, and her name is Sherry.
Hello.
She's a friend of mine whom we were just praying for because of a surgery she just went through.
Yes, and I am very happy about something you actually talk about all the time, which is
Medishare.
That is right.
Yeah. So what was your experience like with Medishare and the healthcare bills?
Honestly, Brant, seamless. And what a blessing that is when you're already nervous about a health issue, which I was.
Yeah.
Members shared my expenses. There were zero problems. And let me tell you, having people pray with you when you call in with your need, that is just...
It is refreshing.
Yes, that's what it is.
What I keep telling people. People love Medishare, and they love saving tons of money, too. The typical family can save $500 a month.
I am very thankful for Medishare. It is so different, and I mean different in a very, very good way.
It is good different. Call now. They're easy to talk to, and you can get a price within 2 minutes. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Stern. Stand by for news and commentary next. Last year, Howard Stern made a stunning announcement to his listeners. The legendary shock jock said he hated Trump supporters, called them stupid, and then he told MAGA fans that he didn't want any of them listening to his Sirius XM radio show anymore. That was last year. This year, Sirius XM announced they were ending the Howard Stern Show. It's never a good business model to alienate most of your audience. Stephen Colbert learned that lesson the hard way, too. His far-left politics literally destroyed the CBS Late Show, canceled a host of MSNBC anchors also out of jobs, and CNN, mostly because Americans are no longer interested in funding Trump derangement syndrome. Stern is just the latest celebrity to learn a very important lesson. Once you go woke, you go broke. Well, the values of our founding fathers are under attack, and that's why I want you to read my latest book, Twilight's Last Gleaming, available at toddstarnes.com.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And this week, August 4th through 8th, is the National Truth for Youth Bible Week on AFR. So help us give away thousands of free Bibles to young people across America. AFR and Revival Fires International are partnering to provide hope for teens as they return to school. So you can help us reach a generation of young people and get the Word of God back into public schools through the distribution of the popular Truth for Youth Bible to teens across our nation. And so thousands of young people have received Christ through reading and receiving these Bibles, more than 30,000 over the last 24 years. So our goal this year is to help get 65,000 Bibles into the hands of teens. Parents can order a Bible on behalf of their son or daughter, or teens can call to get one. You can also order large quantities of the Bible for just $2 each. Visit tfy.org. That's tfy.org. Or you can call, and this is not open for about another hour, but write this number down if you'd rather call, 800-733-4737. 800-733-4737. So that line is open between 8:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Central Time. So if you're listening to the podcast version of this program when we post it after the live show, then that number will likely be available. Or you can go to tfy.org. And thank you for helping us get Bibles back into schools. So this coming from the Epoch Times, Trump raised India tariffs 50% over Russian oil imports. India's purchases of Russian energy are, quote, fueling the war machine, Trump said earlier. And he is imposing an additional 25% tariff on India, so lifting that total rate to 50%. This coming as it's announced that Trump is going to meet with Vladimir Putin very soon. So what does all of this mean for the economy moving forward? Let's welcome in Tho Bishop, who is a content director at the Mises Institute. And Tho, where do we stand on tariffs? That's actually a word we haven't spoken on this show in a while, but apparently still making headlines.
Yeah. Tariffs are continuing to be, I think really the biggest policy story of the Trump administration, at least from a domestic point of view. And I think one of the things that is interesting is that on the campaign trail, we heard a lot of justifications or a lot of the explanations for why this was, why we're going to go with this approach. We heard it was about bringing back jobs. We heard that it was about replacing the IRS and with the revenue that we were going to get from tariffs. We heard that it was about having better trade deals, and then we heard about it going after China, and this new aspect with India, we're now seeing kind of a further mission creep, if you will, which is tariffs as a means of trying to conduct foreign policy. We saw something a little bit similar with the tariff regarding China negotiation or Canada negotiations, kind of very similar these days. But the Canada negotiations and concerns over their views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And so here it's the use of these tariff negotiations as a way of trying to dictate the way that other countries are engaging with some of the foreign policy issues we have going out there. And I think that's actually kind of some of the concerns that free market economists have about the use of tariffs as a policy tool, is that, they can be, we can talk about, jobs being created and that sort of stuff, and there's complications to that from an economic analysis point of view, but this is kind of my view, an example of mission creep of we're now kind of using what was sold as an economic tool for something that's not economic related. Again, foreign policy is important, but it's not necessarily economically in the best interest if we're doing this to try to dictate outcomes in a foreign conflict. And so I think that's kind of one of the interesting dynamics, is that this larger discussion about trade policy, there's a lot of different objectives that have been talked about. Not all of them are aligned. And so this is just another layer to that larger dynamic that we're seeing going on right now.
And so what are the ripple effects on global trade for both U.S. consumers and India's economy?
Well, India has been a growing market for us. And what's interesting about this is from a multiple directions. One, India was seen as a kind of a safe harbor, as with the a lot of American companies seeing China as a increasingly dangerous sort of place. I think there's a lot of expectations, right, that the main focus of a tariff policy, particularly from the Trump administration, was going to be China focused. We saw that first time around. We saw Biden even kept those, right? And so there was a lot of, I think, expectation around American businesses that, okay, we're going to try to move out of China and find other markets to do a lot of the manufacturing that goes overseas, and India was seen as a safer harbor there. I think iPhones, for example, right? Apple was moving a lot of their production over to India, and so this is a big deal. It's also a big deal, from the geopolitical aspect of the China front, because theoretically, right, if the goal was to isolate China for a foreign policy perspective, India would be a player that you'd want there. And other, Southeast Asian countries would be kind of within that basket that you'd want to really have some support there. And so again, this is kind of an interesting pivot in many ways away from a lot of the priorities of kind of 2016 Trump, right, the China focus, both on a domestic economic point of view, but also from a foreign policy view.
Yeah, and so as we're headed into now, this is over 6 months into Trump's term, and tariffs were the big talk and everything. I mean, do you think that overall his policy has been successful? Are we still in kind of this wait and see mode, or where do we stand overall in that determination?
Well, I think in terms of the broader basket of policies, right, I know they're doing a lot of work on the deregulation side of things. I think that there's good aspects of the big, beautiful bill, even though obviously it didn't address the spending aspect in a way that people like Thomas Massey would like. I think there's definitely some positive things that you can pull from it. I think the broader trade policy, though, is something that I think it really is a shadow right now, in part because, again, like the first time around, we saw a lot. It's the goal of using tariffs as a way of getting better trade deals. There's some success with that. A good amount of success with that the first time around. This time, trying to get there are some trade deals have been done, and that's good. Some of the reworking of things, right? But there's a lot more competing sort of objectives that seem to be in place on what does a good trade deal, look like, or what are the objectives of these negotiations from the Trump administration's point of view. And the more complicated that becomes, it makes it more difficult to get something that creates certainty. And there's a lot of the economy can factor in new taxes, which essentially all the tariff is. It's a consumption tax. But it's the uncertainty aspect of it. It's how not being able to know when's the next increase going to come from a particular country, which country is going to be the next one to draw its ire. That is going to be that's not good for American businesses that rely on international inputs for their stuff. And that includes if they're selling consumer goods, and it's true if there's stuff that they produce here in America that they rely upon foreign components to go into it, into that final product and like. And so I think this is one of those areas where, again, this how deeply these deals can change. This sort of really aggressive approach. Again, the growing mission creep makes this entire dynamic a lot more difficult. Now, again, can that be offset by some of these other policies in other areas? Perhaps, right? But it is, I think, a very a dangerous environment, particularly considering that Trump inherited a much weaker economy in 2025 than even 2016. I mean, I think some of these are some of those kind of concerning clouds out there in terms of where the economy might be going in the future.
And I'm speaking with Tho Bishop, who is content director at the Mises Institute, and you can follow him on X. And do you think that for the average voter, coming into kind of midterm territory, we're all starting to talk about that now, the election next year, with everything that's going on in Trump policy, the mandates, I mean, the big headlines have been focused on the DOJ, Epstein, some border control, some of those things. How big of a factor is the economy playing? And do you think that the average voter is still connecting kind of that policy and some of the tariffs and the impact on consumers to things like their grocery bill or, some of these products that may ultimately have a higher consumer ticket? And is that perhaps damaging for Trump, or how do you see that heading into the midterms?
Well, luckily, again, by a lot of the measures out there, have an inflation, which the consumer price inflation has been a lot better than it has been in recent years, right? So we're not necessarily seeing this play out in terms of pressures at the checkout line, right? And that's where, again, a lot of the focus was on, a lot of concern was, this is going to be inflation. The Fed, it's kind of using that as a justification for some policies there. And then that's a secondary component to where I think there is the real concern kind of played out with some of the jobs numbers is the impact on businesses themselves. And the job market seeming to be very, very tight right now, and the difficulties out there for that. So I think that you're talking to you see consumer sentiment, you see a lot of different surveys. I think that obviously the views on the economy are a lot better now than they were at the peak of the Biden administration. And I see kind of a low threshold there, considering just how bad things were a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, so there's definitely still a vibes component that is helping to Trump's advantage. But the question is going to be, 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever. And I think a big aspect of what the Trump administration is betting on is that, regardless of the concerns that there might be out there about trade policy, that the domestic components of the big, beautiful bill, particularly on some of the things on taxes and other aspects there, is going to hit before midterms. And I think that was a big reason for how aggressive they were with the signing aspect of that, and that you'll get a positive trend going into the midterms. But I do think that polling has shown that there's definitely a hit of support in a variety of different areas. You had a very Trump 2024 brought a lot of different kind of political coalitions together. It wasn't just MAGA; it was libertarians, and it was Kennedy Maha moms, and it was Bitcoin bros, and it was, Joe Rogan listeners and things like that. And there's definitely, I think, specific aspects that have damaged, that have hurt perhaps some of the people that voted for Trump the first time, their perspectives on the administration. I think the way the family Epstein situation would be one of those, particularly with younger voters. And so I think there's definitely been some grind down on the 2024 coalition. But the good thing that, the Trump has going for him is that I don't think the Democrats have done anything to demonstrate that they are, by any means have learned their lessons for their past issues that drove a lot of people into the 2024 MAGA coalition in the first place. And so, when that is your opposition, then maybe you can get away with some stumps in the road between now and then.
Yeah, and so do you think overall voters are still seeing the economy in a positive light with Trump? I mean, is this still one of his winning issues heading out of the one big beautiful bill? And we really haven't seen Trump try to sell that as much as just stating the effects of it. I mean, we've seen all of those press releases that continue out of the White House and so forth. But is this still overall, in your opinion, looking at, where the voters are in this, is this still a winning issue for him?
I think that you're probably as a whole right now, it's, from what I can tell, I don't think that it's a losing issue, and put it that way. But I do think there's a big difference if you do not have a job right now. There's a lot of indications that is a real issue. And so if you are employed, if you're happy with your employment, right, if you are, I think that you probably see the economy as doing fine. If you're in some of these other areas right now, I mean, and I want to emphasize again, a lot of the problems with the economy are not the direct result of Trump's policies, right? There's issues, there's concerns I have about trade policy, but that's a secondary component. There's the economy that Trump inherited from the Biden administration was much weaker than it was than when he came in office in 2017. And so there's a lot of these systemic issues that are still at play. And so again, I think it just comes down to where you are in the economy right now. And again, the job market right now is not particularly strong. So if you are trying to improve where you're working right now, right, if you are trying to that upward trajectory, I think there's definitely, there's been a lot of pressure on younger generations, Generation Z in particular, which unfortunately is a generation that it seems to be further in debt than most. So as they're coming into those, whether in their early adult years, there's a lot of, I think, particular stresses that they have dealing with. So, I think that, right now, probably as a whole, Trump has probably a lot more trust than Democrats on that issue. But again, I could see things getting worse before the midterms, again, largely for reasons that aren't directly related to Trump policies. But I think some of playing around with the trade situation is certainly not going to help that.
Yeah, I'm speaking with Tho Bishop, who's content director at the Mises Institute. And very quickly, with about a minute left, what is your view on this meeting between Trump and President Vladimir Putin? I mean, are they going to talk anything economy, or is this more just the Ukraine, Russia related?
I'm sure there'll probably be some side dishes, but I think Trump has obviously been very frustrated by the way that negotiations have gone with Russia since he took office. And obviously, again, like this is a major play in the India thing. So maybe, things go well on this front, then maybe the India trade negotiations improve quite quickly on that regard. That's how interconnected all this can be. But I think that a lot of what we've seen from the Trump administration the last couple of months has been trying to escalate on that situation to get a better deal. So hopefully for everyone involved, we'll see see a path to peace coming out of this.
See the art of the deal, perhaps. All right. Well, Tho Bishop, really appreciate it. You can follow him on X, and we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
The Middle East, that's one part of the world we need to pay attention to, especially the country of Israel. Each week, I'll help you make sense of what's happening in that region through a biblical lens. I'll bring you important information about security threats, archaeological discoveries, biblical prophecy, ministries happening on the ground, and much more. I'm John Riley. Join me for the Middle East Report Special Edition every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio as I connect you to the people, places, and geography of what we read in God's Word.
Hello, I'm Don Hawkins, here to tell you about Encouragement Live. 55 minutes of industrial strength radio encouragement featuring resourceful guests, plus practical biblical insights to help you face life's challenges. We'll be taking your phone calls, so plan to join us for Encouragement Live, Saturdays at 7:05 p.m. Central, 8:05 p.m. Eastern, here on American Family Radio.
It's Truth for Youth Bible Week. We'll give one free Truth for Youth Bible to every student between the ages of 13 and 18 who promises to pass it along to a friend. With it, more than 30,000 young people have come to Christ over the years.
So I tried to commit suicide and I was put in the hospital. One of my friends from school, she came up to me and just started visiting with me at the hospital, and she gave me a Truth for Youth Bible. So I haven't been the same since.
The Truth for Youth Bible consists of the entire New Testament and full-color comics, which present the gospel and moral truths. Parents can order the Bible on behalf of their son or daughter, or teens can call to get one.
We saw so many lives changed and seeds planted in the hearts of our students.
Visit tfy.org anytime or call 800-733-4737. That's 800-733-4737 between 8:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. to order or donate. It's Truth for Youth Bible Week with Revival Fires International.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor was kind, and best of all, she didn't judge me. In just a few minutes, she helped me figure out a plan that consolidated all my bills into one lower monthly payment. This substantially reduced my high interest rates and put me on the road to success. In the end, I saved thousands in interest, and today, my credit card debt is a thing of the past.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Neil. Take it from someone who's been there. Call Trinity and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and thanks to the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis here in the great state of Florida. According to the new Florida Commissioner of Education, Anastasios Kamoutsas, who is my special guest this morning, Florida is home to more than 150,000 homeschool students. And he writes on X, no state offers more freedom in educational choice than Florida. I sent a letter to homeschool parents today, this was a few days ago on August 5th, praising them and Governor DeSantis for the strides made over the years. Keep up the great work as we head into the 2025 to 2026 school year. So, Commissioner, thank you so much for joining. And this is so close to my heart because I was homeschooled, as my regular audience knows, K through 12 all the way through. This was the greatest blessing that my parents gave to me. And so for Florida specifically acknowledging homeschool parents and the commitment to protect homeschooling and the right of parents to have that freedom and choice of education in Florida is wonderful. So we all thank and commend you for that. And so how is it going in the great state of Florida with homeschooling?
Well, good morning, Jenna. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And it's been a real blessing to see under a short period of time that the numbers have doubled. I mean, in the last decade, we were at about 77,000 families participating in homeschooling. Thanks to the leadership of Governor DeSantis, we're now at 150,000 students participating, and we know it's going to continue to grow. And it's great to see parents have actual voices in the state of Florida where they're able to direct the upbringing of their children. They're able to make the decisions that are in the best interest of these babies of theirs. You know, I often talk to folks, why am I so passionate about parents' rights? Well, number one, I have 4 daughters, a 9, 7, 3, and 1-year-old, and I know what it's like raising these children. You know, the stress you go through as a parent, from taking them home from the hospital, changing diapers, getting shots, taking them to doctor's visits, all the work that goes into raising a child prior to them going to the education system. And then you get there and you want to be involved. You want to be in control. You want to make sure that the decisions that are being made over these children are ones that are in their best interest. And so it's great to see that we provide so many different choice options in the state of Florida. Homeschool is one of the many great options that we provide, and it's come with quite a bit of legislative action that the governor has taken. You know, you look at in March of 2023, one of the most innovative tools that was created when we expanded these scholarships to be universal school choice was the personalized education program. And that's what gives parents flexible funding to customize the learning and select the curriculum of tutoring needed to help their students succeed in homeschools. And so you've got about 100,000 students that are getting homeschooled and benefiting from that program. I know there are several other thousand students that are benefiting from the Family Empowerment Scholarship. And so in a lot of states, if you choose to homeschool your child, you just don't have these same options. And one of the things I appreciate as well about Governor DeSantis is he never rests on his laurels. So yes, he expanded school choice to include funding for homeschool programs to support these families as they're providing homeschool education. But then he signed a bill this past summer that expanded the opportunities for these students to participate in extracurriculars like sports or band. And so, you know, when he signed that legislation, it gave students the ability to play on their local high school football team, for example, or join the band or be part of any activity that's offered at a school within their district. So it's not just the school within the area that they live, you know, the immediate zip code, but any extracurricular activity that's being provided in that district. Now the child who's participating in homeschool is able to also participate in that. And that's a big deal to be able to get ahead. You know, there's often these narratives when it comes to homeschooling about socialization and how children are developing in that aspect. And I've seen, interacting with friends and families across the state who are homeschooling their students, anything from co-ops to sports to, you know, bands or other extracurricular activities. There's definitely just as many options for homeschool students as there are students going through the traditional public school. So it's been really awesome to see the progression under the leadership of Governor DeSantis of just how much support Florida has provided these families. There is no state in the nation that supports homeschool families like Florida, and as a result, our state is thriving.
That's amazing, especially comparatively to my former home state of Colorado that's trying to criminalize if parents won't go by the preferred pronouns of their toddler. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So you compare and contrast what Florida is doing to support parental rights versus some of these blue and purple states, and Florida, even among the red states, is just winning. And I love what you said, Commissioner, about the whole socialization question. What I always love to say is, you know, I did miss out on a lot of the socialization education at a lot of these public schools, things like peer pressure, drug use, and, being shown, all the sex ed curriculums on. I mean, I missed out on that as a homeschool student. What a bummer, right? And so I was actually going out and I was an intern for my lieutenant governor at the age of 14 or 15. I mean, really young. So it's like I got to actually go and do some things through my homeschooling experience that certainly I missed out on a lot of the negative things in public schools. And was able to benefit from not only my parents' discipleship and the choice of homeschooling, but also with having a lot more access to things that regular students don't. But you also mentioned, Commissioner, the Personalized Education Program, or the PEP. It's kind of a type of ESA that homeschool families can receive around is it $7,000 to $11,000 per child to spend on education materials, curriculum, tutoring, some of those things. Because expenses, especially in the current economy, are a big consideration for parents homeschooling, what exactly does this provide to Florida families?
Yeah, no, that's just it. You hit the nail on the head. Provides that customized learning. I mean, that's the real greatest benefit of homeschooling, if we're being frank. The individualized attention that the child is receiving as they're being provided the instruction. That's with the traditional public schools, you typically have one teacher, and, there's a certain amount of students that ranges from 20, 25. And so that's the real benefit that parents have provided to us as they decide to homeschool. Is I'm providing individualized instruction and attention to my child. I'm, preventing my child from being exposed to inappropriate topics at early ages, as you indicated. And now the state is supporting me in being able to decide what is the best curriculum that fits my child. Where is my child struggling in a specific subject area? So now I can also use some of the funding for tutoring services to help my child, whether it's, some people have used Mathnasium as like an additional math support, or, sometimes it's English language arts where the child is struggling, and, they're able to use a tutoring service through a reading comprehension coach or a platform that's able to help the child when it comes to the science of reading and this emphasis on literacy that has been pushed by the governor in the state of Florida. So, there's so many different variations of benefits that I've heard from the folks who are actually in the trenches implementing the homeschool education. And I think you have seen this trend across the state. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Choice improves the education system as a whole. Traditional public schools are benefiting as a result of these choice programs. You have seen in our state, we had 117 DNS schools last year. This year, thanks to choice, thanks to progress monitoring, and so many other policies that the governor has championed, we're down to 71 DNS schools. That's huge. Think of the thousands of students that are benefiting as a result of these bold policies. And I remember highlighting when we were at the press conference announcing the progress monitoring results in the school grades, you had now between 2022-2023 school year in English language arts to now, over 100,000 students are on grade level and proficient when it comes to English language arts, thanks to school choice, thanks to progress monitoring. In math, same thing, over 115,000 students now on grade level. And so this is what you want to see. You want to see kids getting, the education that they need, that is necessary for their success. And that's the whole point of the education system. It's not to indoctrinate and impose an ideology on these kids, but to make sure they understand the basics, math, reading, science, and civics, which those scores also, 70% and up in both science and civics in our state. And so you're seeing the traditional public school students are benefiting as a result of the competition. Parents are going to vote with their feet. And if there is a failing school, they're not going to send their kids to those schools. They're going to send their kids where there's real educational opportunity. We're seeing it at charter schools, private schools, traditional public schools that are performing, and we're seeing it in homeschools. And I'm so thankful to be in the state and to be the commissioner of education in a state that puts the parent first, puts the students first, prioritizes their education in that way, but also encourages teachers in this state to, be empowered and free from, distraction during their instructional time, supported financially by this governor who year after year has dedicated a pot of money that is solely to be used for their pay increases. And so it really is a beautiful education system, the number one education system in the nation, thanks to the leadership of Governor DeSantis here in Florida.
Amazing. And, as we are, we're a national program, I'm sure there are so many who are listening from other states who are thinking, wow, I really wish that my state had that type of commitment to putting parents first and recognizing that it shouldn't be about indoctrination. It should be about teaching the basics. And so is Florida, as Governor DeSantis has been creating this blueprint that is great for other states to model, are you partnering with or attempting to at least partner with some other states to get their programs and their protections specifically for homeschool parents up to the level that Florida is?
Yes, Florida, thankfully we are often collaborating with so many different states, in so many different areas as it relates to education. But yes, homeschooling is also one of those areas. You're seeing the push, thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill, of a national school choice program that's going to now benefit so many other like-minded states that are willing to participate in that program. But yes, homeschool is at the top of the list. You think of higher education, which is where, oftentimes they complete these homeschool programs and then they go off to a higher education, institution. And we have partnered with other states, whether it's related to accreditation, whether it's related to the, credits that will be able to transfer from one university to another. What is going to be an admissions exam that we're going to now accept in Florida? We utilize the classic learning test because we saw that there were so many students going through the home education programs or through classical schools, and the SAT and ACT just didn't translate for those students. Oftentimes, those are additional programs or tests that push an ideology, and it was refreshing to see the classic learning test is just focused on reading and mathematics. Imagine that. So time and time again, there's been policy decisions made in the state, and oftentimes we collaborate with other states as we roll these policies out to be able to not just help Florida students, but students across the nation. And so we're thankful that we're seeing it at the federal level through many different venues, whether it's executive orders being issued, whether it's the bill that was passed by Congress, even the Supreme Court recently decided in the Mahmoud case that students cannot have an ideology imposed on them, whether it's sexual orientation or gender identity, and parents not have the ability to opt out. Everybody's so excited about that decision, and I tell folks, hey, I'm fortunate to have lived in Florida where that was the law for years, thanks to Governor DeSantis. We made sure that parents, he got a lot of flack for it, but parents would have the ability to opt their children out. And whether it's kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, you cannot be taught sexual orientation and gender identity in our schools. And if it's going to be 9th through 12th, parents have to actually opt in to be able to receive that sort of instruction. And so our parents have been empowered from the beginning. And when we talk about that, because folks say, well, how is it even allowed 9 through 12 in Florida? You've got Supreme Court decisions that come up where people will talk about the Obergefell decision, the Bostock decision. And so there are times where those issues are addressed through Supreme Court case law, for example. But even in that instance, the parent has to be fully informed and make a fully informed decision on what they believe to be in the best interest of their child, at least in the K-12 system. So we're proud to stand along our parents and support their rights and make sure that there is no ideology being imposed on our students in the state of Florida.
Yeah, and I love your commitment and the governor's commitment to standing up for parents and their rights and their right to choose what's in the best interest of their children and not defer that to the state or the government, because we know that children are given to parents to train up in the fear and admonition of the Lord and to direct their education as they see fit, not to have the state come in and impose all of those things like the sexual orientation, gender identity education, or all of these different curricula, but also you're willing to fight the fights that need fighting and not just say, okay, well, we'll back off of our policy if it goes up to the Supreme Court or anything like that. So just in the last minute I have with you, Commissioner, what can we expect in the forthcoming rest of Governor DeSantis' term?
Absolutely. We are going to continue to put students first and prioritize parental rights. We fundamentally believe in protecting the innocence of our children. We fundamentally believe that children are a gift of God, and we are going to give them the greatest value that they deserve through our education system. And so we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to continue to push the pedal to the metal and make sure that we are giving a world-class education to all of our students in the state so that they can be proficient on grade level, go on and make, and do successful things and give back to society and be productive members.
Amazing.
So we're excited to rest on that and continue to push.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. You can follow him at Stasi Kamoutsis on X. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.